Animal Kingdom and Rich Strike went from the synthetic to the roses. Are we going to see a similar story this Saturday at the Jeff Ruby Stakes? Let's take a look at that race and more stakes action at Turfway Park. Salutations and welcome, friends. I'm your host to this very special Trust the Profits Stakes preview. My name is Matthew DeSantis, and you can find me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. Well, as I mentioned in the intro, we are going to be going to Turfway Park because they are hosting a 100-point Kentucky Derby prep race, the Jeff Ruby Stakes. Of course, last year we saw Rich Strike run in that race and then run to the roses about a month later and win the Kentucky Derby. Animal Kingdom did a similar thing many years ago. I was actually at that Kentucky Derby, always have a soft spot in my heart for Animal Kingdom. So it's an exciting race, but there's some really good stakes races throughout the card. So we're going to look at the Kentucky Cup Classic, the Bourbonette Oaks, which is a Kentucky Oaks prep, as well as the Jeff Ruby Stakes. But before we get into that and my very special guest, just a very quick reminder to press that like button on this video. Let us know who you like in the states action on Saturday at Turfway Park, and make sure to press that subscribe button to Trust the Profits on YouTube to get all of your horse racing content. Well, like I said, I have a very special guest. Whenever the calendar turns to Turfway Park, there's only one person that I always turn to, and that is Kaitlin Free. Kaitlin, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate you coming on, and what a card on Saturday at Turfway.
Thank you for having me. And yes, it's a big one. There's definitely some wide open races, actually more than just definitely some wide open races. There's a lot of wide open races, but that's kind of how Turfway always is. But there's some doozies on the card on Saturday.
There are. And, you know, I appreciate that it's not 15 races like what we're having to deal with over at the fairgrounds for the Louisiana Derby. It's close, but it's at least a manageable. I'll take 12 all the time. And so let's talk a little bit about and dive into what is not there's 6 overall stakes races, but really the kind of the late pick 3, if you will, right. Starting with the Kentucky Cup Classic. And this was a race that Rich Strike was initially supposed to be pointed toward. Seems like there was maybe just a minor setback. He'll be, looking maybe going to the Oaklawn handicap coming a little bit later this season. But let's dive into this because this is a huge field. You have 12 horses and with 14 overall horses, 2 also eligibles. Yeah. Mile and an eighth, obviously on the synthetic for 4-year-olds and up. Kaitlin, where did your eyes take you in this race, and what are your thoughts on this one?
This race was really, really hard for me to narrow down. I still haven't 100% narrowed it down. My eyes immediately took me to a horse that I did this to you last time. I'm hoping this horse gets in off the also eligible list because I think he's a horse that keeps improving. It's a horse that likes to come from off the pace, and there's a ton of speed in this race. Yep. And that's the 13. That's Verstappen. He's a horse that just keeps getting better and better. This distance is fantastic for him. So I'm hoping he ends up getting in. Really, really hope he does. There's so many mic makers in here. I'm just like, catch one of them, please. So hopefully he gets in. But if he doesn't, I'm going to be looking at probably Wolfie's Dynaghost or King Cause. Santon also was one that I gave a chance to throw in here. I'm torn between King Cause and Santon and kind of interchanging those two. I like Wolfie's Dynaghost because he's the type of horse that he does have some tactical speed, but he can come from off the pace, and he's won last time out over the Gulfstream all weather, which is a pretty similar type of surface. I'd say it's the most similar to Turfway, and a lot of horses kind of can win at both tracks. Santon's never been on the all weather, but I obviously respect the class. Brendan Walsh has had him training over the Turfway surface for a while, so I like him. And then King Cause is the defending winner of this race. So those were the 3 that really stood out to me, but I will definitely like Verstappen a lot should he be able to get in. But I mean, obviously that's a big if at the moment.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, Santon is a horse that is near and dear to my heart. Probably one of my biggest wins was actually the Exacta and the Hollywood Classic with him and Beyond Brilliant and hitting that at a ridiculous price. And so Santon ever since then has been very near and dear to my heart. And I put not an insignificant amount of money on him to win on the Kentucky Derby undercard the day that he won at 10-1 with Tyler Gaffney on board. So I'm always a fan of his. You mentioned the speed. And I think there's a ton of pace that's going to be in this race. That's one of the things that worries me a little bit about Santon is just how close is he going to be to that pace?
Right.
Is he going to be a little bit more of a late charger? And he's coming off a bit of a layoff. I'm just curious about kind of the conditioning. I do like the fact that he's been working over the all-weather track, and that Brendan Walsh has had him there for a while. So that's definitely a horse that I was interested in looking at. Like you, Wolfie's Donna Ghost is a horse that immediately draws your attention. You see those speed figures on the Gulfstream Park Synthetic, among the best speed figures he has in his career.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly is a capable horse. Like you said, has tactical speed, can sit off a little bit. I think, John Velasquez is obviously going to be able to get a sense of the pace of this race pretty quickly and take a look at things in terms of, does he have an opportunity to get on the lead or should he take back a little bit? A couple of other horses that I'll just very quickly mention that are pretty big long shots. One is the horse Ready to Perform for Brad Cox.
Mm-hmm.
This horse has run against good competition in the past, is trying a new surface, but is versatile with speed. We've seen this horse wired the field. We've also seen this horse come from pretty far back. So I like that sort of versatility. Again, at a price, because you'll probably 12 to 1 on the morning line. Wouldn't even be surprised if that floated up a little bit more because of the quality in this race. Right. And Cox is a trainer who's very familiar with the all-weather track and have a sense of whether his horses should take to that surface or not. And then the other horse that, like I said, is intriguing to me and maybe nobody else, but I kind of like Camp Hope. So Camp Hope,
that was the one I was thinking of that I liked at a price a little bit. Yeah.
So Camp Hope's a horse, Ken McPeak, that I really liked actually back in that Hollywood Derby that Santon's was a little bit of Santon's coming out party with Beyond Brilliant. And, he's a good horse and really showed that he likes the Turfway Park synthetic last time out. Finished, I thought, a solid second after a really extended layoff. I mean, we're talking 6-month plus layoff.
Yep.
And goes and runs, I thought, a solid second, makes up a lot of ground late. He's got the right type of pace set up that he's going to come running late. 12 to 1 on the morning line. He's got the far outside post. So there's concerns. How are you going to save ground? What's the trip going to look like? But again, at a price, I'm willing to try to give Camp Hope a little bit of a shot there at 12 to 1. But a lot of good quality in this field is what I would say.
Yeah, even though we're missing the Kentucky Derby winner, and I thought there was a chance that maybe Tiz the Bomb would run here instead of the turf race at Fairgrounds, which I'm a little bit disappointed in because I would have liked to have seen him in this race. I'm still itching to get that horse back at Turfway because he really loves the all-weather. So I'm really surprised that they decided not to go here. That was kind of my impression that was where they were headed. So I was really surprised not to see him entered. Rich Strike obviously has came up with a quarter crack. Or he grabbed a quarter. It wasn't a quarter crack. He grabbed a quarter. But still, even that, this field still drew 14 and is still very, very wide open. It's a very good quality field. So I agree with you. And, if you don't like King Cause or Stanton in this race, there's plenty of other directions you can look.
Absolutely. No, very much so. Ed DeRosa trying to get that horse Tiz the Bomb in the winner's circle somewhere, anywhere on any surface right now. But
him and my boyfriend, that is my boyfriend's all-time favorite horse. He loves that horse. And he's like, if he would have been here, he would have won because he knows I was here. We've literally been to every single race that horse has won.
I love it. Love it.
Obsessed. And his least favorite horse is also in this race. So it would have been super interesting. He's very bitter with Stanton.
Oh, okay.
So,
that's interesting. He and I need to talk then. Okay.
Yeah, you need to have a conversation moment with him because he's just got a very unhealthy dislike for that horse.
Well, a horse that I will say, just based upon the morning line odds and the connections, that's probably going to draw a lot of money that I'm really all the way out on is Aban in that 11 post. 6 to 1 on the morning line. He's going to get money because of Irad being aboard. People just always will gravitate to that. But this is a horse that I don't know what happened to this horse. This horse just feels like he's fallen off a cliff. I mean, from running in these turf marathons to now trying a new surface. And I just don't have any confidence. So that's where I'm kind of hopeful that we can get a little bit more of a price, even if you're using some of those other horses that we mentioned underneath. Even if you like Santon or King Cause up top, I think you can get past some of these other horses that might be second, third choices.
Yeah, I agree with you. And with him in there, I expect maybe there's a chance that they could float up just a little bit. Santon, King Cause, perhaps King Cause especially.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that he's 7 to 2. I don't think he'll be 7 to 2. I'm more probably like 5-6 to 1, I would say, but we'll see. But no, I agree with you on a bond. This just kind of seems like a real dart throw to me, putting him here in this race. He drew pretty wide. He doesn't really seem to have that style where I think he's going to be able to come wide here at Turfway. I mean, yeah, he's got that distance foundation. He could be wide off the turn, but that doesn't, always work. You have to kind of really have had a horse that has proved that they're able to do that there. And I thought about it a lot with Irad being here at Turfway. He's not really rode much at Turfway at all. He's won the Jeff Ruby before, I believe, maybe once or twice. I think it's just once, but it kind of evens the playing field a lot because the surface this year is playing pretty turfy, but it's also has a different kind of speed bias seemingly every day. And it's supposed to be warm this week. There's supposed to be a little rain. So I'm guessing speed's probably not going to hold well. And I mean, he's not riding here regularly like these other riders are. So while I obviously really respect him, he doesn't scare me as much because I think the playing field's going to be a lot more even since he's not familiar with the surface.
Yeah, that's a great piece of insight. And even though he's familiar with the Gulfstream Park all-weather, obviously, it is a different creature. We talked about this before, whether you're here or at Gulfstream or Golden Gate or wherever you might be with that synthetic, it's a little bit different everywhere. And knowing how the track plays is, definitely something that the local jocks will have a very good sense of on Saturday. Let's move to the Kentucky Oaks Prep race, which is the Bourbonette Oaks 1.16 mile for 3-year-old fillies. And this is also a really solid field of 11 entries. And there is a recurring theme that we're going to see with all of these three races, which is there's a lot of speed. And there's a lot of speed in this race as well, with the number 3 Olympic Prank probably being pretty forwardly placed. I would imagine the number 5 Botanical is going to be pretty forwardly placed, as well as the 7 and 8 horse Miss New York and Flashy Gem, and not even to mention the 11's probably going to want to go, and the 11 the 1 is going to want to go. So there's a lot of horses that are going to try to get up on the front end. That obviously opens things up for closers. I do think this is a race where, a horse like Botanical, it does kind of look a little bit heads and shoulders above the rest when you look at that last effort. This horse, once it has switched to the synthetic, she has won 3 consecutive races by a combined 21 lengths. I mean, she has just not been tested on the synthetic at all. And we've seen improving speed figures every single time out, from a 66 to a 76 to a 91 last time. She has been favored in all of these. She was off Lasix in 2 of those, on in 1. So, I mean, she's kind of answered all the questions. Can she get the extra half furlong? Quite frankly, she's not even been tested late in a race to determine whether or not she needs to be able to dig in for that last half furlong. But she, I think, is a very solid entry. The other horse that I'm very intrigued by is the Brendan Walsh first-time North American starter, Bullavie. And this is a horse that went up against really good competition last time out. Brave Emperor, actually a winner of 4 of 5 career starts overseas in France. This was a horse that finished second twice in races on the synthetic overseas. So that's, again, you're not necessarily making as much of a transition from the turf to the synthetic as you are for certain European horses. At 5 to 1, I'm a little bit intrigued. Irad, we talked about him earlier. He's on this horse. One of the things I do like about Irad is he adjusts pretty quickly. So, I mean, if he starts to see how this track is playing, he can figure things out. Obviously, this horse is a little bit of a wild card, though. But I'm interested, Kaitlin, where your eyes took you in this Bourbonette Oaks.
It took me right back to Botanical, where I've been the whole time she's been at Turfway, because like you said, she just keeps getting better. She's not been tested. I think she's going to definitely get an acid test in this race, but she showed me something last time. She showed me everything I was looking for from her in her last race. She's been on the lead in a lot of races. She came from off the pace in her last race. So I think in this race, I don't want to say she's bomb-proof because there's no horse that is like that, but I feel like she's just so much better than this group. And granted, there's some wild cards in here, like you said. Bulvie, Miss New York is another one, definitely, that's a little bit of a wild card. But I just don't see any scenario like distance, pace, anything that's going to be really that much of a surprise to her. Chris Landeros loves this horse. I have her rated number 2 on my Kentucky Oaks top 10. That's a big deal because she's ran a decent race on dirt before, but she was still relatively very inexperienced. And I think pedigree-wise in her running style, she'll translate back to the dirt just fine. She's had a chance to really, really grow up and experience everything here at Turfway. in that last out race, I was watching it down on the rail. You're not going to see an easier win than you saw that. Like, I just remember when they turned for home, it looked like she was almost just like jogging and just like Chris Landeros didn't even ask her. She completely did it all on her own. So I think she's just, she's one of the probably best quality type of fillies we've seen at Turfway in quite some time. I'm a big fan of her, but honestly, there's a price that I'm interested in here, definitely for my exotics, and that's going to be the 9 She Will Ghost You for Eric Reed and Sunny Leone. And this is the same owner, trainer, and jockey combination as Rich Strike. Rick Dawson also owns She Will Ghost You, and I'm pretty good friends with him. I talked to him, quite a bit about his horses, and I had a chance to talk to him a couple weeks ago. And then I also had a chance to talk to him before she broke her maiden. And before she broke her maiden, she'd ran a couple of times in some 6.5 furlong maiden special weights. And John McKee has rode her most of her races. And John is a very, very patient rider. That can sometimes, be a good thing or a bad thing. But she's a horse that likes to get far back and she likes to close. And eventually they found a 2-turn race that she fit into. Tons the best. She was tons the best in there. So I really am so happy she got into this race, because this is where they really wanted to come, because she's got that 2-turn experience over the track. She posted a good figure that she could really build off of. So I think she's going to be one that a lot of people are going to really, really overlook. And she's got the formula to run really, really well here in this race. And I know they think she's really talented. So she's definitely going to be one I'm going to look at. And Bolvie would probably be my wild card as well. I just feel like I don't know enough about her.
Yeah, no, I think it's great that I love that Sunny Leone and Eric Reed, just all the connections back with Rich Strike. So that's great in terms of She Will Ghost You. And Bolivie, we'll just have to see. I mean, I did some digging into the European pedigree and the European races, but even then you still don't know. I mean, you can look at all, until you're, going cross-eyed, but until you actually see them on the track, it's just hard to know how are they going to take to this? How are they going to take to the configuration of the track, and how are they going to take to the American style of racing, et cetera. So you just never know. One horse that I will also give out at a very big price is the number 4 horse, 30 Thou Kelvin. And this is a horse for John Terranova with Kazushi Kimura aboard. At 20-1, I just think there's a lot of pace in this race. This horse should get the pace set up. That's kind of what I'm looking at with Botanical up top, and then I'm loading up my vertical exotics with just deep closers, basically, at a big price to try to capture something there. And I think this horse could get the right sort of setup. I like that this horse really perked up over the synthetic at Gulfstream Park last time out. And you get Kimura, who's coming in from California, but who's won a bunch of really big races out there on that Santa Anita circuit. So, has some big race experience. And at 20-1 on the morning line, I'll take a shot with that horse underneath and see what you got. I mean, obviously, Irad is leaving that horse. I had ridden that horse the last 2 times to go to Bolivie, but Botanical is kind of the beginning and end of this race from a win standpoint for me as well. So, well, let's head to the final of the stakes races on the card, and that is the Grade 3 Jeff Ruby Stakes, 100 points for the Kentucky Derby in terms of getting ready for those preps in 1 mile and an eighth, and 12-horse field, Kaitlin. And this one I think you could go a lot of different directions. There's a lot of turf form that's coming into this. There's a lot of dirt form that's coming into this. There's a lot of horses that you had hinted at when we talked last time at the Battaglia, who were kind of, you said you're going to see some really good horses that are Turfway horses come in on this race. So I think there's some new shooters for people following the Battaglia. Where did you ultimately land in this Jeff Ruby Stakes?
The local horses really showed up in here. The 3 that I were expecting to go in here that I thought do have big chances, they all 3 do end up in here. That's Scooby Quando, Fantastic Again, and Wadsworth. And I ended up on Wadsworth. I'm going to try to see if Brad Cox and Chris Landeros can take both of these prep races. Definitely, a big shot. Wadsworth drawn pretty wide out there in post position 11. But once again, there is speed in this race. There's speed all over the place in here. And I think it really compromises some of our heavy favorites in here. Major Dude, I'm completely against.
Yep.
He has tactical speed, but he's going to be buried on the rail. There's going to be horses going from all different angles. Aside from him, I think he's just going to get buried on in the inside. And the inside is very, very dead right now. And it's going to be especially so since it's been warm and it's been raining. So I really do not like that draw for him at all. I think that substantially hurt him. 2 Phils, I think, is going to go forward and be compromised. Fantastic Again is going to go forward. Bluebird's Over potentially is going to go forward. And there's several other ones that are kind of more those forwardly placed horses. So that leads me to Wadsworth. And the outside draw doesn't really bother me as much as him. He's kind of like Botanical. He has some tactical speed, but he showed me from the last out race, which was just an allowance race, but it had a ton of these horses in it. And he was heads and shoulders the best. Granted, Scooby Quando had a little bit of trouble in there, but Wadsworth just really, I was against him in that race because I saw a lot of speed on paper in that race, very similar to this one. He came from off the pace and was so much the best in that race. And I think in a morning line of 8-1, I think so many people are going to gravitate toward Major Dude, Two Phils. I think Fantastic Again is going to take a little bit of money. Congruent is going to take a lot of money too. So I think this is going to be the forgotten of the Turfway horses. Granted, people will see the Brad Cox a little bit and get kind of excited. But to me, I think he's the one that's going to be forgotten out of the group. And he comes out of probably the strongest race leading into this spot. I totally see Chris Landeros taking him from off the pace again. They really like this horse. I hadn't really heard. He was the one that I was a little bit iffy on was going to come here because he wasn't on a couple of the talking points. And I'm like, this horse is definitely coming here. This horse is working very, very well. There's no way Brad's sending him anywhere else. Yep. So he does show up here. I don't mind post position number 11 from him. He's going to get a ton of speed to run at, and I don't think it's going to hold. But he's going to be close enough where he's not completely in chase mode. So he's the one that I ended up going with in this race. But I'm also very intrigued. Scooby Quando, he has done nothing wrong. He's had two troubled seconds after winning impressively in a stakes race to break his maiden. And honestly, I don't have any problems with Congruent. Yeah. He closed into a very fast pace last time out, and Sonny Leone obviously knows how to beat horses of this caliber. So those were the three that I really gave the biggest shot to.
Yeah. It's funny. I really like Wadsworth as well. He was my second choice in this race. All the things you said, I would just completely echo. I actually think the fact that there's so much speed is going to help because you're going to have so many horses that are going to want to get up there that even from the 11 post, taking back, you can get over really quick and get a ground saving trip. And to your point, you don't want to be too far on the inside. Being the second and third path is fine.
I can see him being in second, third, or fourth path, but probably being, I want to say, 3 to 4 lengths off of them and sit just a completely fine trip because so many of those horses are just going to start gradually backing up. Yep. And that's kind of where a horse like him, Congruent, and Scooby Quando kind of really come into play. Those are the ones I think are going to be moving late. Major Dude, he's the one that I just didn't know about. And he was the one that I felt the safest to play against because he's never tried the surface. He's drawn on the rail, which has not been great. As of late, I believe this is the farthest he's gone. And Todd Pletcher and I ran on the surface. They don't run here. Yeah. So I just had to, when I put my Bayou Bluegrass pick 5 together, I was like, I singled in the 2 Oaks races. And I'm like, I want to take a lot of horses here, but I do want to take a stand. So that was where it was. Yeah, no, absolutely. So the horse that I'll probably go down on the ship with this horse. I'm developing a little bit of a crush is Two Phils. This is a horse I really like just because this is a horse that runs honest. I feel like every single time out, doesn't really turn in a bad effort, and is versatile enough. I think, and here's where I'm glad that Jareth Loveberry has ridden this horse a few times. This horse doesn't need to be on the lead. This horse can be a little bit further back. Now, this is not, I wouldn't say this is a closer by any stretch, but, sitting mid-pack, sitting, 4th, 5th wouldn't be the worst thing. I mean, this horse could absolutely kind of work on that trip. The question is he going to try to do that from the 10 post, or are they going to try to be aggressive and try to cross and clear a lot of horses? That was my concern with him. But I get what you're saying. I think Larry Ravelli is so good over the surface. And I know he is. Really translate well here. The horse is bred for the synthetic. So I'm really not shocked at all that he showed up here. But you're right. I think this race drew up a lot more speedy than they probably thought it would. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, though, Two Phils has run against the class of the Derby fields. I mean, he's run against Instant Coffee. He's run against Sun Thunder and Angel of Empire and Tappett's Conquest and, Forte and Loggins and all these great horses. And so, he knows the class that's necessary to win.
The other thing that I guess an argument against Two Phils is he's already accumulated a significant number of Kentucky Derby points. They don't need to win this to get to the starting gate of the Kentucky Derby. Honestly, if they finish like third, they're very safe for getting in. So, to some extent, he doesn't need this race, but I still I just like him. He's becoming a little bit of my simplification. So, but he wins hopefully a little bit more than simplification did. So I ultimately Two Phils was my top pick. Wadsworth was my second choice, and then Scooby Quando and Congruent. You and I are on the same page. Ben Colebrook, I was rooting for him so hard during that Battaglia evening because they had just won on Raised Cane, and I thought, oh my gosh, if he can win 2 Derby preps in the same day. And almost did it with Scooby Quando. And you're right, that was a little bit of a troubled trip as well, but showed the ability to close from off the pace. Yes. And obviously Congruent, we saw what he did in the Battaglia, super impressive, clearly likes the surface. And that was just a complete 180 from his previous form. So love to see what Sonny Leone and Antonio Sanyo did with him there. So this is like it's going to be a really fun Saturday night. Kaitlin, thank you so much for joining me. Tell the folks what else is going on at Turfway or kind of what else is going on this weekend or what's happening with you.
So much going on at Turfway. Really, the only concern is definitely going to be for the weather because there's going to be a lot of people there. We've got some chance for some severe weather a little bit tonight, some Friday, and I think a chance of rain on Saturday. So we're hoping that kind of goes away. But I mean, obviously, we're going to be following our sister track Fairgrounds as well. Huge day for them, Louisiana Derby. We have 13 races. They have 15. So that's going to be crazy. And then my morning is going to start with putting out picks for the Dubai World Cup card, which I've got those done. So that's done. Yep. And Turfway's almost done. So I just need to completely finish up Fairgrounds. And then I feel like I'll be able to tie a ribbon on it and just actually do it. But Dubai World Cup night is one of my favorite nights. And it usually coincides with Jeff Ruby. So this is a really fun day for me, but it's also a really exhausting day.
Yeah.
But super, exciting race day overall. And then of course, Turfway is going to close next week. And on our last race week, we are going to be racing in the evening. We won't be day racing anymore, but a lot of the Hall of Fame retired jockeys are going to come out. And we're going to have a big PDJF party and auction and benefit there. So that'll be a cool way to end the season. And then I'm going to take a couple of weeks off and then dive right back into Derby and be in Louisville. So
absolutely. No, you're right. Saturday, talk about an amazing race day. I mean, you're right. The morning over at Maidan to the 15 races at the Louisiana Derby to everything going on at Turfway Park. You got Sunland Park on Sunday as well as a Derby prep as well. So I think you and I are in very similar agreement. I think Japan to the hoop big time over the weekend at Maidan. They already beat us on the diamond in baseball. I think they're going to beat our brains in.
Taste.
Yep. I think they are going to do very, very well at Maidan as well. So Kaitlin, thank you so very much for joining me. Really appreciate it. For all of you listening out there, make sure to press that like button. Let us know who you like in these races at Turfway Park. And remember to subscribe to Trust the Profits here on YouTube. Until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.